This insignificant-looking little deposit was the first discovered crayback of the cave. We have since discovered several others. It's called a crayback, and you can almost see it from here because it looks like a series of scales, and they do build up, deposit sequentially like this, laid, almost like they're laid upon each other like the scales of a crayback. They're also oriented. If you take a thin section of these or a small sample and put it under a microscope or a scanning electron microscope, you'll see that in addition to calcium carbonate deposition, there are microorganisms. So the principle is that there is just enough light to allow growth of usually cyanobacteria, and they photosynthesize and cause the deposition of calcite. In addition, because it's in the entrance of this caveway, it tends to be oriented towards the light, but also with the wind. So each of these plates is a complex of light-oriented and wind-directed biogenic precipitation. Right now, this is dry. It hasn't been raining for several days, so it doesn't look living. There is, in fact, a band of more brownish, greenish stuff. When it rains, this will come alive. It will adopt a green color. You'll see that it was photosynthesizing. And so that it's much more convincingly living tissue when it has been raining. And they all have this band, like a skunk stripe. In addition to having the biogenic input, you can't simply have light and cyanobacteria, because then presumably you'd have craybacks in every cave entrance. You must also have some form of dust. And in this cave, it's got both dust and the wind. So the buildup is the filaments of the cyanobacteria, which grow up, and then they in turn trap little bits of dust, and say every day a little bit of filament grows up and traps a bit of dust. In particular, those dry, windy days will be much more likely to add the dust. So it's very similar to a stromatolite, a classic stromatolite, which is the filaments of cyanobacteria growing up and trapping dust, and then another day's growth, and they trap dust, and then again. Well, this is a larger version of the same thing. The plates here are a little bit different in that they're more vertically oriented rather than flat to the surface. And I actually haven't seen this form anywhere else. I think it's the only one in this cave and the only one I've seen anywhere, where each of these plates grows up vertically. Looks superficially very similar in form to the crayback. It's elongate, it's narrow, it's wind-oriented, and it does have a little bit of natural light, but you'll see that we've got a lot of artificial light here because this is largely inorganic. It's caused by the drip above being moved back and forth as the wind blows, and then evaporating. So it's got a white stripe of evaporative popcorn, classic cave popcorn. This calcite is white on this side. It has a little bit of green, but that's not the most important to its formation. So this would not be classified as a crayback. This would simply be a wind-oriented deposit. Right above us are these light-oriented tufaceous stalactites. If you have tufa on the surface growing out of a spring, it is spring water emergent with all kinds of moss growing in it. It's the same kind of feature up here, but it's a drip from the ceiling, and because we're close enough to the light, on the one side the algae will grow, cause photosynthesis, cause deposition of calcium carbonate, and on the other side there's less likely to be growth, so they generally tilt towards the light. They also have this very porous form because they're full of cells of algae, bits of calcium carbonate, holes, etc. And then in this particular cave, because it's a through cave, there is also a wind. And so sometimes you have to be a little careful when you're interpreting a stalactite that goes in a particular direction, because you have to be careful it's not simply wind-oriented, in that evaporation causes deposition preferentially on the side that evaporates. But in this case, they certainly look like all the algae, and right now they also have various ferns growing on the bright side.